That is a big problem of why we see so much of competition. If we define success only by outcomes, but not all the steps it took, all the people you had to elbow out of the way, all the sabotage that needed to be done, of course we're going to keep rewarding competitive systems and people who are ultra competitive.
Welcome to In Confidence, where what we share in confidence helps us grow in confidence. My guest today is Ruchika Malhotra. She's one of my dear friends. I'm so excited because we're taping this episode on actually the publication date of her new book, Uncompete, Rejecting Competition to Unlock Success. Ruchika is a former journalist, a business journalist, and she's a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review. I discovered her because I had read one of her incredible co-authored pieces for HBR, which was Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. And I stalked her on Instagram until we became friends. She's founded a global inclusion strategy firm that partners with some of the world's leading organizations. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Forbes, Bloomberg, the Seattle Times. She's on adjunct faculty at the University of Washington and Seattle University. Her first book, which I loved, is Inclusion on Purpose, an intersectional approach to creating a culture of belonging at work. I'm so excited because today she is sharing her new book and a philosophy that she's trademarked called Uncompete. I heard about it when I visited her in Seattle a few years ago. She's been working on it for 3 decades. And the idea of uncompete is challenging the belief that competition fuels achievement. And instead it champions abundance, collaboration, and shared success. Let's listen in. Ruchika, welcome to In Confidence.
Lisa, I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we are filming this on the day of your book launch. Drum roll, ba-dum-ba-bum, like this. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I have to say, when I thought about what I wanted success to look like for this book, it was to be in community with people I love. And so when you invited me today, because I'm here in New York, I was like, I have to be in conversation with you. So thank you.
I cannot believe you spent your book launch day morning with us. This is very cool. And I want to just go back in time because I've been your fangirl for years. And during the pandemic, you co-authored a piece for Harvard Business Review, Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. I read it, it transformed me because I had never thought of it that way, around systemic bias being the real driver of how we feel at work. And I think I DM'd you on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Instagram.
Yes. Did I DM you?
I remember. Yeah.
And you DM'd me back saying, actually, I have your cape blazer. And we started this friendship over Instagram.
So cool.
And phone calls. And then we realized we had Deepa in common.
Yes. And then we met in person.
And we stuffed our faces with Ding Tai Fung.
And then we had dumplings. So then that's it. Then you're friends for life, I think.
Yes.
Right?
And over the years, you've supported our work and our book and products and whatnot. And so this for me is a really cool moment.
Thank you.
And when we were in Seattle stuffing our faces with dumplings, you were telling me about this book.
I was.
That's how long ago you've been thinking about this.
That's right. That's right. I can actually say that while I wrote this book over 2 years, I have been conceptualizing it for 3 decades in different ways. And also, side note, I don't want to miss, I'm wearing this cape blazer from Gravitas. I have worn it. I actually wore it on the day that I spoke to my agent about Uncompete. I was speaking at this huge conference. I was in the airport in Philadelphia, and I was wearing the cape blazer, and I was kind of like, I need to take it off before my flight. But I was wearing it. And, when you think about how much confidence and connection you can have through feeling really, really powerful, there's this real thread there. And then Uncompete, I told the idea to her, and the rest is history.
Oh, I love this. Well, we always start every episode with our classic question, and I kind of feel like I know where you're going to go with this one, which is we start every episode with, what are you proudest of from the past 12 months of your life?
What am I proudest of? I am proudest of the fact that over the last 12 months, I have had to define and redefine success many times over. And I've been able to come to a really clear definition of success for me. Every now and then there'll be another where I'm like, oh, this shiny object. But every single road leads back to, like, for me, truly connection. Being in this community of people who love me, who support me, who I hope feel supported and loved by me is, for me, like the North Star in every situation.
And I love that you sign your emails with a specific phrase, in solidarity. Can you explain that to our audience? Because I feel like that embodies what you just described.
Yeah, thank you. I actually started signing books first. My last book, Inclusion on Purpose. It would really annoy people. It would really annoy people in conferences who were trying to get me on a tight schedule. But instead of just signing my name, I would always sign in solidarity, because it came from this feeling of like, we're really interconnected and interlinked in a way that we often forget in our lives, right? We forget in our workplaces, we forget in our societies, in our lives. But we have to be in solidarity to dream of this beautiful future for everyone.
Oh, I love that. And when we were talking about having you come on the podcast, I remember, so much of a book launch is focused on how many books are you going to sell in that first week? Are you going to hit a list? Whatnot. And you texted me back something beautiful. You're like, I just want to spend time with people I admire, love, respect, and just be bathed in that sense of connection for this first week. So of course I will come onto your podcast.
Well, more than that, I just wanted to wear this cape blazer
and see each other.
And see you. No. Most of all, jokes aside, I really, really wanted to see you, because to be in community with someone who has really cheered you on the way you have, Lisa, is you embody the principles of Uncompete, and I'm glad I got to write about it, because sometimes, I'd meet people and they'd say, I really appreciate being around you. You do things differently. How do you do that? And I was like, I don't know. And then in this book, I know we'll talk in detail, but I write about my mother and how she embodies the principles, and really I tried to give name to that, right? Once you give something words and voice, it becomes powerful. And it was also what I tried to look for in friendships and connections in the workplace, but I didn't have a word for it. When I met you, when we connected that first time, when we met in person, we actually met in New York in person the first time, I was like, there's something about this friendship that feels really special and beautiful. What is it? And now for me, it's Uncompete. It's that, like, we looked at each other, we said, like, you're my community, not my competition. I want you to succeed too. How do we make it happen?
Okay, well, we're going to get into it. And before we get into the book, I would love for our audience, can you describe how you make a difference in the world? Just a bit about you so that they understand where all these insights are coming from.
Sure, thank you. I started my career as a business journalist. I wrote for all the big names that you can think of. I reported on the 2008 financial crisis. Loved being a journalist. The part that I struggled with a lot is I would go to my editors and I'd say, hey, here's a story about, an underestimated business owner who's doing amazing things in their community. Or let's talk about how money is being generated outside the traditional economy. And each time editors would be like, our readers don't care about this. So there was a little bit of like frustration there. I loved especially covering women entrepreneurs and women business leaders at a time where the conversation was still very much like women need to lean in, and so from there, I had a small little, I would say like a foray, more like a diversion into tech marketing, content strategy, which showed me that, hey, there's this beautiful and really interesting industry around technology that's, fast moving and cool and innovative and lacks diversity in every real way, right? And true diversity of experience, of background, of thought, of race, of gender. And I didn't know, it just really bothered me. I was like, here are these, again, the company, right? The business's mindset, where I was like, these amazing companies are being built without women, without people of color, without people from all these underestimated backgrounds. We need to do something differently. So I quit my job, left 3/4 of my stock options on the table, which, yes, I regret sometimes just in terms of this economy.
Yeah, and I loved your first book, Inclusion on Purpose. And it came at a time when we really needed a playbook on what to do, especially during the pandemic.
I wrote a book. It felt like talking to myself, and then to be able to, when I saw it out in the world and people told me it's really making a difference, I'm actually able to put into practice the principles you're writing about here. It was so weird because for so long it felt like I was just writing the book in my head.
And now I feel like Uncompete, and let's talk about that book, is the natural evolution of inclusion on purpose, right? So if we're creating these inclusive places and communities and workplaces, then when we get into that arena, when we get into that community, how do we operate? How do you define uncompete? What does it mean?
Yeah. To uncompete is to categorically, intentionally, consistently reject the idea that competition at all costs, zero sum, winner take all approaches is the way to be successful. To uncompete says that there is room for all of us to succeed. There is an abundance of opportunities, and how we get ahead is through the 5 principles, which I know we're going to talk about, of which to me, I kind of go back and forth on which one is the most important, but collaboration, radical generosity, inclusion, solidarity, and abundance mindset. I mean, these 5 principles, I think, are what's going to guide us in this time of polycrisis, to be honest.
Do you feel, and I obviously, because we both embody this idea of there's room for all of us.
100%.
You know, I've introduced a lot of my friends to my speakers bureau, and every time I do it, someone goes, but aren't you worried that I'm going to compete with you on the roster? I'm like, no, because this conference can't have me back next year. They had me this year. Why doesn't one of my friends take the slot next year? I'd rather see you succeed. 100%. And everyone's always a little bit surprised by it. They're like, really? You don't feel like we're going to compete because we kind of speak about the same things? We're both women of color. I'm like, no, because my success paves the way for yours.
That's right.
And by the way, you'll book an event that maybe next year they'll want me.
That's right.
It's not like there's a lack of events. There's hundreds a month. And people are always taken aback. Yes. Why are people taken aback when you do embody uncompete?
Because every single structure to date was set up to make you compete, whether consciously or subconsciously. I see it in my child's school from kindergarten to 4th grade is where he's at. There will always be structures that are set up to make him feel like he has to compete for the best grades, or he has to compete in sports, or he's just not as good as friend A or friend B. It starts when you're very young. For many of us as parents, I know we've talked about being kids of immigrants. I grew up in Singapore, one of the most competitive societies in the world, that we literally grew up being told by the founder of modern Singapore. The narrative was, we went from like third world, literally the words that were used, we went from third world to first world over a few generations because we were better than everyone else. We worked harder than everyone else. We really kept our heads down and worked. So whether it's that, whether it's in the workplace, one day you and your work bestie or work besties, the next day you're both up for promotion. It's time for the sharp elbows out, because remember, only one woman on the leadership team, or only one woman sort of being able to be promoted this cycle. So across the board, we are shown scarcity. We are shown that the way to be successful is to be competitive. It's almost like if you, for example, I write this in the book, if you run a marathon, the first thing after, it's like, oh, good job, whatever.
What was your time?
What was your time? And when are you going to run the next one? Are you training for the next one? Oh, you did New York. Are you doing Boston next year? And are you going to try and beat your time? And it's everywhere.
And you write, that's actually the first chapter, but competition is the water we swim in.
It is.
Which I love that phrase.
Yeah.
Is some competition okay?
Good question. Here's what I've grappled with. And this is honest, right? This is me saying there is no perfect answer. I try to look at competitive sports as a way. I'd write about the Olympics as one where I'm like, maybe this would make sense. The reason why things like competitive sports, why you could still argue there could be some merit to this, is that truly you're operating from a very set, system, rules, ideals, principles. You know what cheating looks like. You know what's allowed, what's not. You know where the starting line is. You know where the finish line is. That's not the case in real life. That's not true in any situation. That's not true in the workplace. That's not true in education. There will always be people who have a leg up, right? And it reinforces a lot of these systems of the sort of the meritocracy trap and the meritocracy myth. However, even in sports, even in something like the Olympics, how many times have we, read coverage of the Summer Olympics, and there'll be a runner who ran for the first time ever with shoes on their feet, right? Or swam the Olympic swimming for the first time in an Olympic-sized swimming pool because they came from such a resource exploited country, right? That they weren't able to do that. So then, can you say that we're competing on an even playing field? You can't.
Yeah, and what I love what you're getting at is you don't have to accept the measuring stick of the system.
Correct.
And I know we're going to get into that. Because I think about going back to your marathon example, because the New York City Marathon happened on Sunday.
The day I was flying into New York.
And there was crowd stoppages and staffing shortages. One of the things that I held myself back from was asking people what their time. I had a couple of friends run it, and I didn't ask how long do you think it's going to take you? Because I think just finishing it in your 40s is a huge accomplishment.
Totally.
And I just was like, I just want to eat Korean barbecue and have karaoke with you afterwards. Ugh. I'm just, because it's not something that I think I could do.
Yeah.
I had this moment in my head was like, should I compete in the LA Olympics? Which I might, by the way. And someone's like, are you going to try to medal? I'm like, no, I just want to hang out in the Olympic Village and sleep on a cardboard bed. And I'm from LA, so it'd just be cool to do it there, right? In my late 40s, early 50s. But one of the things you're getting at, and it's kind of interesting, is that in that zero-sum thinking is you have to accept that the measuring stick is valuable to you.
That's right. And what I found every single time is we think competition elevates the best in people. It's usually a race to the bottom. And I see this in the workplace. I see it in the way businesses are run. I see it in friendships. Competition does not bring out the best in us. And in many ways, I've written this, competition in many ways is about how do you find the best at a defined, measure that doesn't really actually matter, right? It doesn't make a big difference to the world.
It's, for example, your measuring stick for this book launch is I want to spend time with the people I love.
Totally. It really was, Lisa, because, I could feel those scarcity feelings. Now that I've written Uncompete, I had to really take my own advice and eat my own medicine. And that's hard sometimes. But you have to do it.
When my book came out, actually 6 months beforehand, my literary agent said, we're not going to talk about lists.
Yeah.
She's like, you might not make any of them. You're a first-time author. No one knows who you are. She goes, that's not why you wrote the book. You wrote the book to change people's lives, to bring the work that you do in a dressing room to a broader audience. And we're just not going to look at the numbers. And you're going to do everything you have to do. But you've already changed my life, and that's one person who's better off because of your book. And that framed my whole, I did not feel that level of competition, right? And I could be with my friends. I could send the book to my friends. And it felt like, I told someone, my book tour felt like a homecoming because all these people over the course of 25 years in business got to come see me and hug me and bring their kid or bring their best friend. I was like, that was kind of amazing, right? That she said that to me 6 months before the book came out. She's like, it's done, it's baked, the plan is there. Don't look at the lists. You're not going to hit half of them. So why do you use that to beat yourself up?
What a smart person.
Yes, she's brilliant.
That's what you needed to hear. That's what I think more of us need to hear in any situation,
So let's get into it because there are 5 principles that underpin Uncompete. Yeah. Can we go through those 5?
Yeah. So there's radical generosity is the one I actually lead with, although I didn't in the book. I want to talk about radical generosity, and if we end up spending a lot more time, then I'm okay with this because radical generosity is this idea that for us to create the world that we want to live in, one that is, free of the zero-sum scarcity, winner-take-all competition, then we have to be able to be so generous that it may actually go against a lot of the principles of what we've been taught about. And that means putting out into the world the level of generosity that will both pay it forward, and if it pays back towards you, that's wonderful. But it really creates this cycle of we want to make sure that whatever generosity we provide it goes forward well beyond the one person and touches many, many lives and creates an ecosystem of that. I have seen it time and time again. Again, like the example you said of referring folks to your speakers bureau, whether it's as an author, I have sent my book proposal far and wide. I haven't put it under any special, whatever it is, like lock and key. I don't believe in that, right? I really want to be generous. I really want to be abundant. It does benefit me too, right? I think about my last book with Inclusion on Purpose. I got so many rejections that was like, oh, we already have a woman of color writing about this. Like, we don't know if people like you with a name like yours can sell books, right? And for me, actually having other women of color, like literally, I know we love Deepa Purushothaman in common, another woman with a name that's not, immediately identifiable or familiar in a Western context. Our books literally came out on the same day. And we tried so hard. And, Deepa was the last person I saw, professionally in Seattle before I left for my book launch tour. And the level of how generous she has been to me, and I hope she feels the same level of radical generosity back. I think we've been able to create an ecosystem where people see what it's like, what it looks like in practice, to see that model. So that is, I would say, for me, one of the most important principles of Uncompete, radical generosity.
So of the 5, I believe in all 5, and I know we're going to hit some of the others. This is one of my favorites. This is probably my top 2.
Great. What's the other one?
Maybe top 3. I mean, I love all of them, but
okay.
I live radical generosity.
You do.
This is actually something that's really important to me.
You do.
And so if you were going to practice it, if I'm someone who doesn't naturally operate this way, what are the tips that you give to someone to do it?
Such a good question. It's this. We have to get out of the scarcity mindset, which is actually why abundance mindset comes before radical.
I was going to say they're very connected.
That's why abundance mindset actually comes in the book. It's very linear. Wanted to make sure that if you have never heard of me and you've never kind of seen this out in the world, I wanted it to be a very linear process. And even the book is structured as choice, action, and resistance. So the choice piece is so much around resetting our mindset, which I know is something you and I both really deeply believe in. Gravitas is a fabulous way for us to get into that mindset of what does it really mean to show up with confidence and power, right? And gravitas. So an abundance mindset does come before radical generosity. And what that really means is rejecting the idea that there's scarcity in every situation, that there's only room for one, believing truly from your heart that, yes, this is gonna, I have to have an abundance mindset. There's not just one speaking opportunity. There's not just one book that's out in the world. There's not only one promotion that I can get, right? It's this or nothing else. You kind of take a long-term view of your life and your career versus that short-term, this is the next thing that's coming, so I gotta get my sharp elbows out and be really scarce, have a very scarcity mentality around it. It's also something I saw growing up in Singapore. We actually have a word for FOMO before FOMO became a word. It's called kiasu. It's normal to say I was, where you want to go to a restaurant, you want to say I was kiasu about it and I went first, or that sort of thing. You didn't want to miss out. Whatever you did, I rearranged everything because I didn't want to miss out. Let's be kiasu, And so it's letting go of that. It's almost it's leaning into the joy of missing out as one of the practices I talk about.
And these might be all of them are great. My friend Jane Park, who you also know well, she calls it socialism amongst friends. And there was this day where I was really sad, actually, because our company hit rock bottom during the pandemic. No one was buying cape blazers or work clothes. And, I said, I'm just not going to hit the financial targets over the next few years. And she said to me, she's like, Lisa, you're probably never going to be a billionaire in your lifetime, but you are a billionaire in terms of total value created in the world.
Wow.
And it blew my mind when she said that, because she said, you just help people without, and whatever resources you have, if they're valuable to someone else, you will give them to that person. And
I've lived that too with you.
Yeah, and it's just this idea of where you're going, which is, okay, I have a set of resources that could be helpful to you. I am no worse off if I give them to you or provide them to you. and fundamentally you will create more value with them over time. So this idea of it's an opportunity landscape. There's a lot of abundance in the world. And it doesn't hurt me to be generous with you in terms of what I have.
Yes, it really doesn't. And I think research shows this, right? Like research shows, Adam Grant's research shows this, right? That the world's most successful people are givers, not takers, or not even matchers, right? There's research even in our social circles, right? This is why I think we are experiencing a huge loneliness epidemic and crisis. It was interesting, former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy's research was very clear on this, right? We are in America and many Western countries, we are facing as adults a loneliness epidemic because it comes from this scarcity of like, if I don't work all the time, or if I take time to invest in my communities in any way, like I'm going to lose out. So I'd rather not. And like, look at the burnout, look at the loneliness, look at the scarcity and fear that so many people live with every day. That comes from rejecting a very human need to connect that we all have, you know?
Well, so, okay, I'm going to put myself in these principles. So I've got an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
I'm going to be radically generous with the resources that I can provide to others. Give me the other three.
Yeah. So there's inclusion, and that really is about looking at who in our community has been included and who in our community has been left out, and be very, very intentional about making sure that they have opportunities. And I think sometimes, especially among in groups which have experienced scarcity or stack ranking, women have had that, people of color have had that. You know, if you're an immigrant, you know, I'm an immigrant to the United States, I've definitely seen that. There's this belief that you gotta like sharp elbow each other to get to that one spot in a system of oppression that wasn't designed for you or was designed to keep you in your place. So inclusion is about how can we really build community and generosity with people who are like us that actually society tells us we should compete with for scarce resources. It's being really mindful in rejecting that idea that we got to practice scarcity with
and
people.
This is
like
why
that.
I saw the connection to your first book.
Yeah,
because one of the things I loved is this idea of when you're the only, you're fragmented. It's easier to pick you off. And then when I bond with someone who shares a similar story together, it's much harder to push us over when we've linked arms.
That's right. And again, I talk about the Me Too movement. I talk about literally, you know, how wage equity, how paid time off, paid family leave, these all came from inclusion, and then solidarity, which is my next principle, which is so much around how do we show up for people who have been perhaps more oppressed than us or who have faced a different type of oppression. But the belief that in that abundance means not just my community rises, but other communities who have also been oppressed rise. And so the one that I really write about is the level of generosity that I have seen practiced by and personally experienced and been lucky to receive from Black women. And there is so much of kindness, and there is so much of like deep, like, I'm going to show up for you. Even last night, you know, I had my book launch event. I looked around the room, and the number of Black women that were there was really, really something important, something that made me pause and remind myself that the way Black women show up for everyone else, it is a skill and it is a gift that we all need to learn from, so that they're not the only ones doing it.
Interesting.
You know?
And why do you think that is?
I think it comes from a deep place of empathy. You know, it comes from a deep place of suffering and the third part of the book is resistance. But the only way you can do that is you got to do something different. You got to push back. You got to show up. You got to be in solidarity. It is magical and masterful to witness. And I will say the level of scarcity I've seen in my own community, I get asked last night, I was at my book launch event, I was in conversation with Dr. Uche Blackstock, who is an incredible physician, thought leader around health equity. I mean, just all the things, New York Times bestselling book Legacy. I mean, just an incredible human being. And Sahej Kaur Kohli, who runs Brown Girl Therapy, also
love that.
Also a wonderful book author. I interviewed Sahej for the book. Sahaj and I, really, the question she asked me is like, how have you navigated the type of scarcity you've seen, you and I have seen and talked about, both behind the scenes and here in conversation in public, the level of scarcity that we have in our communities. And I said, there's so much. There's such deep pain and trauma when you feel unseen from your own community, or rejected for trying to practice collaboration, which I know is the last principle. But collaboration, literally, like, how can we do this better together? Even for people, like, I'm a solo writer. I like to write alone. I do write alone. I have struggled in sort of group writing settings because I just get like, then I want to be like, so how was your day? Tell me about like what you've been up to. Then the whole day goes by and I'm like behind on my manuscript. So I am a solo writer. And something I did differently with this book is I sought collaborators for the book proposal. I sought a collaborator to write the book with once I was done with the version I was happy with. I did send out portions to people who I trusted. And the thing that really affirmed me was, once the book was done, but well before it was anywhere close to publication, I sent it to people who I thought embodied this. Deepa was one of the first people to read the whole book. She read it over a weekend on her iPad or something. That's the shape it was in. It was definitely not like in any sort of physical, tangible thing by then. And she sent me the most generous email ever.
She does that, by the way. I did the same thing with my manuscript.
You did?
And she's the best. She'll just be like, this is wonderful. Like, here's some ideas. And I put her in the book a few times. And I put you in the book as well. And if I were to apply these 5 principles in a workplace, can you give me an example of, on a daily basis, and I want to embody this, I'm a director level in a big company, and I'm walking through the door and I have to uncompete today.
Yeah.
What advice would you give me?
Yeah. I think this is something that has to be practiced in a very vocal and visible way, because actually yesterday, even at the book launch event, there was a question, from a workplace perspective, like, if I walk in and I want to uncompete, but everyone else competes, how do I do this, right? And I think that this is the core of this question. I think you have to do it very vocally and visibly. I hope, whether the word ends up being uncompete that people use, which by the way is a made up word that I've trademarked. So whether you use the word uncompete and say, like, I really believe in the principles of uncompete, here's my leadership style is that I uncompete, that would be magic, right? But
Love that.
I mean, that's one way. But really it's to say, like, I deeply believe in collaboration. I deeply believe in, like, my success only comes with my team's success. This is how we measure collaboration. I would love if more organizations, right, the sort of inclusion strategy when that comes on, I have advocated in every organization I've worked with over a longer period, I have advocated for having performance measures and rewards measures literally tied to examples of collaboration. Because we know collaboration begets psychological safety, which is my team has my back, which leads to greater innovation and other growth outcomes, thanks to wonderful research by Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. But what I would really like to see as an individual leader is so much more of that conversation around, like, what can we do to create a collaborative culture here, right? We do not reward what Deepa has termed toxic rock stars. That is a big problem of why we see so much of competition. If we define success only by outcomes, but not all the steps it took, all the people you had to elbow out of the way, all the sabotage that needed to be done, of course we're going to keep rewarding competitive systems and people who are ultra competitive. So there are ways to do this that are really tangible and tactical and actionable, specifically when I think we show up and we say, like, this is how I'm going to show up for you. This is my leadership style, and I embody it in action.
I saw a recent example of this. I had done a couple of events for a large pharmaceutical company, and it was for one of their ERGs. And one of the things that I was struck by is they had co-leaders of the ERG. And they had never done that before, because it's a 2-year term, and it's usually one person's the kind of executive sponsor. And when I asked them about it, they were like, well, this is a step up for them. And for me, it's something I've always wanted to do. And we decided to do it together and share the responsibility and share the glory, because it was a very visible ERG within this pharmaceutical company. And I was really struck by that. And they've created essentially a legacy now that it'll always be two people. It won't be one person running the ERG. And I thought, how simple is that? That I think would hit your uncompete radar.
100%. I think that's an amazing example. After the book came out, I didn't write about it in the book. I've been looking at research around the importance and some of the successes of co-CEOs.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Right? I'm thinking of Netflix specifically, having two CEOs. I think this is the type of innovation and the type of like, just because we've done things, for 100 years this way, that doesn't mean we need to do it for the next 100. I mean, think of the way AI disruption is today, right? I don't think one single CEO today is equipped to deal with, not even one leader, even if you're not the CEO of an organization. And so to be able to be creative about how do we create co-leadership and co-responsibility and bring in people from different disciplines to lead is so necessary in this time.
Yeah, because if you think about let's go back in time, because we are old enough to remember like the 2000s and CEO succession planning.
That's right.
At Fortune 50 companies.
Yes.
There would always be a loser in that battle. It would always be like, oh, Jack Welch is retired. There's two guys that are qualified and they're going to battle it out. And they're going to battle it out. Yeah. And I think about where we are now, which is like, let's have co-CEOs because you bring different strengths. And this is too much for one person to handle.
It is too much. It is too much. I think this is true. And I think we need to think of that no matter what we do, whether you are a CEO, whether you're a leader of a large organization, or you're a leader in a smaller department. I think it is really important to ask yourself, what does that look like? A separate and very quick topic is also job sharing, which, a Nobel Prize winning economist, Claudia Golden, when she looked at how in the pharmaceutical, well, actually among pharmacists, there was very minimal, there was almost negligible wage gap because of job sharing, right? Essentially, a pharmacist could do their job, they could work on a shift, and then because all that knowledge was sort of available to the next pharmacist, they would come in and they would do their shift and everyone would be paid equally based on how much time they spend, right? There wasn't this level of this person has all the knowledge, this person only has execution, so there has to be a wage difference.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to transition because this season is all about, we call it the last quarter challenge.
A bit.
And it's a 10-week training plan for confidence. And every Tuesday, we give people a 10 to 15-minute episode where we release a challenge. We encourage people to try it this week to get stronger. And then on Fridays, when our guest comes on, we ask them to talk about the challenge.
Yeah.
This week is one of my favorites, which is worst case, best case, most likely case. And it's an exercise I do with my bestie, Jane Park. She's also my shame buddy. And whenever we face uncertainty, we always will say, okay, what's the worst that could happen? We kind of let that inner critic have a voice. And then we say, what's the best that could happen? And then we'll go, most likely. And it usually gives us a sense of control, even though there is no control. But at least I've vocalized out loud, what's the worst case scenario? So I feel strong enough to handle it.
Yeah.
And the worst case is always catastrophic. So I'm always like, have you ever done this exercise? Does it work for you?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of when you've done it?
Yeah. Actually, I'm really, really glad that I got familiar with this exercise because I really needed it this week, right? As you go into something really big, right? And that could be, I mean, I remember feeling very overwhelmed and having a similar sort of like worst case, best case, all of that when I had a child, and then birthing this book has been very similar, right? Having it out into the world. There's a lot of like, oh my gosh, the worst case scenario could be I could walk into a book launch event and literally not a single person apart from like maybe my mom is there. Or, the worst case, I mean, there are so many, right? That someone could totally trash the book and say it was the worst thing that ever came out. Or nobody reads it, nobody buys it. Like all of these worst case scenarios are very real because the metrics coming back to competition, the metrics are there, right? Like this is what success looks like. And then when you hit that, the hedonic treadmill, no, but this person got that. So their success, that's what success looks like. Okay, no, you know what I mean? So worst case scenario, there's so many ways I could have and have catastrophized what could happen. Of course, the best case scenario, I mean, again, in a book launch, in anything big you do in life, you know, you get accolades. People are like coming in to shower you with attention. You know, there's like
every room is filled to the brim, standing room only.
Standing room only. There's a line out the door. And the reality is most of the times it's that messy middle or sort of, you know, the realistic scenario happens, right? And for me, I actually have to say, like, redefining success, how we started this episode, like talking about success and defining success, was very important to me, because the sort of middle best case, like, you know, the middle case scenario, what do you call it? Do you call it the most likely scenario so far has come true, right? I'm surrounded by people who really love me, who have cheered me on, since the idea was, you know, 3 decades in the making. From my school friend from high school was there yesterday when I was in New York. You know, my mother and my sister and my brother have flown in from corners of the world to be there for, you know, the Seattle events. And so what this means is, if we constantly look at others' definitions, I think we're going to unfortunately most probably live in the worst case scenario. We might be delusional and live in the best case scenario all the time. And I think being able to say, no, what does that success look like for me, is what helps us create the most likely.
You know, you've made this exercise better, because you just said something. When you lay out the worst case scenario, it also allows you the opportunity to reject the metric of success.
Yeah.
So if I lay out in your example the worst case scenario, you then are empowered to say, but those things don't matter to me that much. Or, hey, you know what? Whether or not that happens, it's not going to change how I feel about this book or how I feel about the work that I put out. Yeah. So I think that's a really important shift in terms of when you say the worst case scenario aloud. It's not just being able to face it, it's being able to reject it.
Yeah.
And say, that's not valuable to me.
And be able to define it, right? And then when you hit most likely, the realistic one, that's when you're like, oh, wow, that really feels good.
That felt good. I was planning on that one. Yeah, that's the one I was hoping for anyways.
I was hoping for that, actually, right? Not what everyone else told me I should be, wishing for.
Now, I have to ask you, and I imagine, by the way, the idea of competition just makes that worst case scenario worse. So that's part of your whole philosophy. Yeah. If I'm picking up the book today, and I haven't read it yet, but I've listened to this episode, and today you want me to embody this. Just one thing that you want me to do to embody an uncompete way of living. What's the one thing you want people to do today?
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't actually said this publicly to anyone. I wrote about it in the book. It's to give someone else their flowers today. Ooh. Yeah. It could be in any way. And ideally, especially when I think about inclusion and solidarity, it's someone who society doesn't often give flowers to, right? It could be the janitor in the office that you work in. It could be, for me, I'm really proud of this. I say this not because I want flowers for this. I wish we could all give folks flowers. There are 3 people in the book that I named that, was a huge surprise to them. One was my son's kindergarten teacher who really taught him kindness in a way, and really, in a very special way. One is the assistant director in my son's school, who has created these beautiful connections where the students of, especially solidarity, building around, with students of color, meeting for lunch, Matab. And then the third person is my son's nanny and sitter, who has been so important. And there's so many other educators. As I was writing the acknowledgements, I was like, oh my gosh, but I should also write like this person who was there like the first time he went to daycare. And then I had to be like, okay, stop. Like this there's
a word count.
So give flowers to someone, the person who made your coffee the way you liked it. Every time I fly out of SeaTac, there's this place that, I get my coffee from. They make it just the way I want. And when they do, I say, thank you so much. You made my day so much better. This is the highlight of it. So I can now get on my flight and be ready for it.
Well, I will give you your flowers today. And I will say the first piece I ever read from you in the Harvard Business Review changed my life. Completely reframed how I thought about the world. The myth of meritocracy was all of a sudden bust because of your work.
Thank you.
I think secondly, I always feel supported by you. Like I never have doubt about the strength of our friendship, even if we don't talk to each other for years at a time, months at a time. And third, Uncompete is absolutely how I hope to live my life. And I'm so glad there's a whole book about it. So thank you. I will give you your flowers today.
Thank you so much. I received them. The old Ruchika would have been like, no. But again, practicing radical generosity. So I receive it. Thank you so much for being so generous.
I hope you loved this episode of Inconfidence. I hope you're leaving this space stronger than when you entered it. Every time I get a chance to spend time with Ruchika, I learn something new. And today, one of the phrases I'm going to take into my week, my life, is the idea of an abundance mindset and radical generosity. This idea that we don't have to compete, that there's room for all of us, opportunity abounds, and on top of it, when I have resources that might create value for you, I'm going to open the doors to connection and give you what I have. That radical generosity has changed my life, whether it being the recipient of it or the giver of it. And I hope today you practice it in some way. I hope you'll also remember our challenge this week, which is worst case, best case, most likely case. And I loved the ad that Ruchika gave to us, that when you talk about the worst case and you give it a voice, you're able to let go of the expectations or metrics that do not define you. If you love this episode, I hope you'll share it with someone who needed to hear it today. Make sure that you enter our last quarter challenge giveaway. So on LinkedIn, post if you've done this week's micro moment, how it impacted you, and you'll be entered to win a special prize from us. Enter all of them for all 10 weeks and you'll be entered for a mega giveaway. And until next time, in the words of my 9-year-old self, I see you, I value you, and I believe in you. This is Inconfidence.